the off-gassing from the rust preventative might ruin your oven, so just be careful.
Yes, because it might not earn you any friends at the baking competition.
Right.
Howdy, Roy.
Hi.
So, this is starting the build of the rear axle for the M715 project. This is going to be a little different than a lot of what we've done out here in that we don't have to strip this axle down.
Right.
All of the brackets, everything that was on it originally can stay intact.
The YouTube and GoPro gremlins strike again. I started editing this video, it's now May, and this was actually shot back in late December, early January. And they didn't realize that somehow the audio had gotten muted. So no worries, they're just taking out the center section, setting up a workspace, that kind of stuff, just basic stuff that, well, they tend to like to leave the camera on as they are doing stuff. I don't blame them. They have work to do. You'll notice this is before Kenneth had his surgery to repair his shoulder. I can't tell you what Roy is saying, but I'm sure it's very handy. It's probably about, a tool being used to help take the pinion out. Anyway, fast forwarded this. We're going to get on to the second day of the axle build while I'm still away at the dog show, but it looks like they had rediscovered their audio.
Take two. Talking through what you're about to see, because we won't be able to do it and talk to it and record it all at the same time. ARB builds this locker as a common unit for both the Dana 70 and Dana 80. There's a lot of commonality in sort of the overall size of the carrier. With that, the holes in the carrier are all pre-drilled for the smaller half-inch bolt that is used by the Dana 70. Our Dana 80 ring gear bolt does not fit. So these have to be drilled out to 9/16 inch rather than the half inch in order to accommodate the Dana 80. That's part of the ARB instructions and the process we're about to set up. Simple enough to just drill however many holes, open them up. But we're going to do that on the drill press. We'll punch the holes out to accommodate the bigger bolts for the Dana 80 ring gear. Oops.
It's not bolted down.
Helps? No, it is not. It is not. Okay, let's lube it up and try for round two.
Getting these about the right width apart, nailing a support.
Okay.
Oh, this is so much nicer. So, a couple of 2x8s, a couple of 2x4s, and we have a nice solid fixture. We were trying just with the 2x8s and it was wiggly and wobbly, and this is a lot more stable.
I know that laser is slightly off, so that's looking very close anyway. It's interesting how it gets, there must be a softer layer in there.
Well, yeah, there's
two layers.
There's two layers.
Because yeah, it starts cutting a lot faster.
Yeah.
2 hours later.
And he started there.
And done.
And done.
Once you get the holes drilled, you got to make sure you clean it off thoroughly. Kenneth is just wiping off the main gunk, and we'll get some brake parts cleaner here in a second.
So, a couple of things that happen. First is, we do not want any little pieces of metal inside the locker, on any of the seal surfaces, inside the gears,
Or
because
bearings.
that will tear things up.
Yes.
It will result in getting to do this job again, as well as trying to figure out which pieces got torn up by what. The other is that all of this gets coated from the manufacturer with a rust preventative, which will cause things like the Loctite that we're trying to use to keep bolts from backing off and keep things from moving to not bond correctly to the metal. So just clean everything up. Wash all the crud out so that everything sits where it is supposed to, runs true going forward. You see, even on the bottom side from the drilling, we've got little pieces of metal.
That's bad. If that gets in, you're deaf.
Now for the fun and games. Kind of set this in place. It is a slight interference fit, but you want to get that in there and get the first couple of bolts started if you can.
And if you have trouble making these fit, sometimes it helps to put the locker in the freezer and the gear
In the oven.
in the oven, although the off-gassing from the rust preventative might ruin your oven, so just be careful.
Yes, because it might not earn you any friends at the baking competition.
Right. Alternatively, you can blast it with a heat gun or something like that.
Yeah, well, they do say do not use a flame.
Right.
So we've drawn the ring gear up onto the carrier, which is that fun and games with just pulling it in very carefully, very slowly. Now, this is one of those you do not want these to come apart, and they include with the master overhaul kit an appropriate flavor of oil insensitive Loctite. And this is a red, so back to the idea of things you never want to have to take apart. Red is a good choice. And so red Loctite of the appropriate variety on every bolt. And then we'll take this over to the vise and torque all of these to spec. So yeah, the torque spec is 220.
Get your big torque wrench out.
Get the big torque wrench out.
Trying our new vise.
We're trying out the new vise that was bought specifically for this purpose.
And a few others.
But yeah, I think let's start at like 125, 150.
125.
And work our way up.
Okay, and you really need to do a cross pattern. You don't want to just torque one right after the other. 3, 4, 5. Okay, and all right, so we were at 125. Our goal is 220. What do we want to step up to?
So that's a 100-pound difference. So let's do like 175.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Because yeah, that was the only way we got it done last time.
Right, because if your lever is all the way out here, it's more torque rotating. If you're crossing over the center,
It's a little bit less.
it's a little bit less. Yep.
Okay.
All right.
All the way to
220.
220.
And it didn't seem to slip much at all.
Not much. There was a little, but not much. Yeah.
It's just not going to be fun. Yep. 220.
So much better than last time.
I like this vise a lot better for this application.
So much better. So, as part of the setup, we create a set of setup bearings. We just basically removing, in the case of this one, removing a few hundredths of an inch from the inside so that the bearing will slip in where it needs to be, addressing the normal interference fit. This can be done using your favorite cutting tool. A lathe would be ideal. Don't have a lathe, so in this case, a little carbide, a little bit of grinding. With my hands, that's about right.
So now it's time for assembly. First thing we're going to do is we're going to drive in the races for the pinion bearings. Neither one needs shims. Shims go elsewhere. First thing we do though is these ship with rust prevention, corrosion inhibitors, whatever this gunk is. A little bit of brake parts cleaner and clean it off. The idea is we want to keep this as clean as possible to keep as much gunk and debris and chemicals and everything out of it that we can. It's not going to be perfect, but we're going to, every little bit helps. And so, yeah. And so there we put the, that's where the race is going to go. And we just have to drive it in. And bias the hip towards that side.
And then all of a sudden it sounds very different.
It sounds and feels different. It does line itself up as it goes in. So don't worry too much about if you get it slightly crooked. If it's a lot crooked, then you can pop it out. There it goes. And you do want to make sure you use one of these drivers that is just slightly undersized, because you have to drive it all the way down in the hole and you don't want the tool getting stuck. And it will feel different. The hammer will bounce back a little better, a little harder. And that's when you know you're really there. Yep, and we're in.
Okay.
So, using our sure step, because our stand is up kind of high, and you really want to be, it helps to be up here at this level, because otherwise you're hitting like that. Now I can hit a little straighter, a little easier. And then, just like that.
With the Dana 80 and the ARB, all of the shims go on the outside. All of the shims go on the outside of the bearings, which means we can go ahead and press the final set of bearings onto the carrier. We just need to press them down and drive it to where it's tied up against its seat. Shop press is by far the easiest tool for this. A hammer is a bad choice. So it's just a matter of setting it up, kind of like earlier, hanging onto that leftover piece of axle shaft makes a really nice spacer for this in the press assembly.
Yeah. And also, that round disc right down here came out of the bearing tool set.
Yep, making sure you're pressing against.
Only the interior. It's actually a race inside the finished bearing.
Yep.
So yeah, you don't want to press on the cage. You want this to be free spinning as you're pressing. Sometimes it does that.
Sometimes you get pops. Yep.
And as long as it's going smoothly, you're fine. Once you get a lot of resistance on the bottle jack, you know you're seated.
It is probably seated. Yep.
And on the Dana 80, the carrier actually sits below the level of the top of the race.
And this is probably part of the
70/80
aspect of this. Is it's in there.
Yeah.
And perhaps on a 70, the bearings would be a little thinner.
Right, and on some other axle, like the 60, the 44,
This would be proud.
yeah, you have to figure out how to press it down even further. So
Ball joint service kit.
ball joint service kit.
It's amazing. It's amazing the things that turn into press tools.
Yes.
Okay, now we've got to do the other side of this.
Yep.
It's time to install the coupler that gets the air from the outside of the axle into the differential. Now if you notice here, you can see this lip. You can see that little itty bitty hole right there. That's the hole that the air goes through. And in order to get the air from the outside, you have this tube that we're going to bend up in this coupler. And in here in this coupler are a couple of grooves. Here are the O-rings. The tube comes through into a little hole, and so when you apply air through here, it comes along through the tube into here. It's contained by the seals, and air pressure goes into the differential. And the reason you have to do this with these rings is because this stays stationary. This tab right here, actually there is a bracket that comes with the kit that holds a tab right in here to keep this from spinning. So this stays stationary. This carrier rotates, and so this is how you get from a stationary point to a rotating carrier. And so we just have to assemble all this, because these are not O-rings. These are actually, they have a little bit of dimension to them.
Yeah, it's just kind of a square seal with a double lip on the interior side.
And the exterior.
Yeah. So you have to make sure they go in, don't get twisted.
And right now I'm just using whatever oil was sitting on the shelf.
To provide a little bit of lubrication.
Yeah. You don't want to get too much, and you don't want to get, you really want to try to avoid getting too much oil in the hole there. And yes, be very careful when you're putting these in. Make sure they're not rotated in any way.
Or infested with squirrels.
Infested with squirrels, because the dogs will bark. And visually check to make sure there's no rotation. Put in the other side. Yes, these fit very precisely in the groove, and so I'm trying to maneuver it into the groove. It does a little bit of weird stuff. But yeah, so we are in. I'm going to run my finger, and my finger does not detect any spin in the seals, and it also work some of the oil around it. And then you gotta come over here. And again, really you're not looking to lubricate much, but you do want it wet. We decided that this was the right orientation because
that will be down
this will face down in the housing
when that is
and that
keyed.
is out, because this is otherwise symmetrical, so you could end up doing it this way, but the instructions say to have it this way. And bend that just slightly. And be careful when you're putting this in, because you don't want to knock the O-ring out
Of its groove.
of the groove. And that's part of why you're using oil. Yeah. This is an interference fit. And you kind of have to compress the ring as you go.
And rotating it as you go just to help it seat in.
Yep. And it does take some force to spin it, which is what you want. That way you know the seal is tight. Again, the more you clean, the less chance you have of having contaminants in your differential that make something go bad. So just clean, clean, clean. Okay, so now it suddenly got very tight, and we look, and yes, we are there. Give it a little bit of extra just to make sure it's fully seated, and you're good. This should still spin, take about the same amount of force. If it doesn't spin freely, then you know something's wrong. But this is spinning the same, exactly the same as when it was just freestanding. So you know there's no interference there.
Okay, this is a process of repetition. So as we pulled this thing out, there were no shims on the pinion. So we're going to start with no shims on the pinion, see where we end up, basically replicating the configuration before we pulled it. That goes in with our setup bearings, just like that.
Here's a quick look at how Roy organizes and prepares all of the shims ahead of installation. He takes the time to clean and measure each one, and then on clean paper towels he lays them down, writing down their measurement in the center and stacking any additional ones with that one so that they can easily do the math when the time comes.
0.500. So we need 480
For grins.
This is shorter than the original one that came out by 0.480 inches. And so 0.18, 0.0180, and then 2 1/10s, which is
390.
no 290, 400. But then I need 80. So 480.
480.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right. Now it's time for a test fit. Grab this long angle.
Yes.
Okay.
Not even close.
Yeah. Our measurement was off.
No, I'm going to save you guys a lot of the bad camera angle here, and they're fussing with it. They went back and tried the master setup, decided that they needed to spread the case a little bit better, and eventually just through, what axle building entails. Tried and true, trial and error. They eventually landed at something they were happy with. And after all that playing around, they eventually got to a point where the bearing caps were able to go on. And back out the original ones come so that they can use the ARB shims instead and continue to do yet more math.
Okay, so original shim. Okay, that takes out 370 total. And we know that 370 total out has 0 preload on the
It's too much.
is not enough.
So half of 370 is 165.
No. 185.
185.
Okay. A little bit. Okay.
And with the new math complete, the new shims go in, and back comes the carrier and locker.
Okay, so that slid in.
With the case spreader.
Okay, so take the case spreader off.
As it came out,
Like, give me just a little tweak back and forth, see if you
I do have a little bit of backlash.
but are you hearing the backlash or are you feeling the backlash?
I'm feeling.
Because this is moving.
No, I can feel it.
All right.
Yeah, there's a little, not a lot, probably not enough. All right. So now we're at a point where measuring backlash is at least an interesting exercise.
And the bearing caps go back on yet
So you
again.
get up towards 439. And I gotta remember how to. And yes, I still have the pipe plug to go in the ARB hole.
Yes.
And they're in the way worse than ever, so we're going to go ahead and skip ahead here.
Here we go.
First test. Okay. Aha. Trusty Yukon gear. Where's the pattern pictures? Here we go.
So, to me, heel to toe, we look about centered,
Yes.
but the pattern to me looks deep inside here.
Yeah. Pinion is too close if you're too low. Coast side is towards the heel
A little bit.
and centered top to bottom. Pinion is too far away, you're riding at the top of the tooth.
And as a reality, knowing that we have no pinion shims,
Yes.
pinion is too close is a real problem for us.
And I don't think it is too close.
We need to be too far away. So I would agree, I think the center pattern, in which case we need to make a pinion depth adjustment.
Need to add pinion depth.
Yeah, which is, given where we're at, we expect.
Yeah.
Boys decided that they were tired, hungry. It's Sunday night. Time to call it a weekend. They're going to come back at this next weekend. So stay tuned for part 2, and thank you for watching.